What job would you not take, even for $10,000 a month? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Social worker. When I left uni, I worked as a temp for a short period typing up the reports for a social work department. The stuff those people have to deal with on a daily basis is both heartbreaking and sickening. People like to shoot on social workers, calling them busybodies and the like, but honestly, for some kids, they're all the protection they've got, and I would never ever want to do that job for all the tea in China. Answer. I'm married to a social worker who's a therapist but started in child welfare side of social work. People who think they're busybodies or break up families or whatever should count their blessings that they haven't seen the darker edges of humanity. It's hard to fathom some of the awful shoot people will do to their kids' romantic partners. Certainly not something I could deal with, and the burnout rate is such that even the best intentioned and trained folks have a hard time carrying that burden, and they get to be in grave danger of an unstable person attacking them for their trouble. Story 2. Veterinarian. Sure, you get to help a lot of animals, but putting them down day after day is not something I want to get used to. Answer. The euthanasias aren't even top 5 of why this job sucks. It sucks eliminate animals, but when you reframe your thinking to realize you are doing them a great kindness and taking away their pain and suffering, that gets much easier. The part that sucks is the people, the abuse cases, the verbal abuse we face daily from clients, the neglect, the people who can't afford a surgery or treatment and treat you like you're trying to take their money instead of help their pet, who expect free services because if you cared about animals, you would, without realizing we cannot do that for everyone and pay the staff and keep the lights on. We already make far less than our equivalents in human medicine. It doesn't help that corporations are snatching up vet-owned practices, driving prices up for clients, which makes them think we are all soulless, corporate-run practices who are after their money. It also drives up our costs when our vendors realize they can charge these corporations more, but we can't keep up when we're barely staying afloat at actual small vet-owned hospitals. The people in the corporatization are what make this job suck. There's also a lot of toxic environment and attitudes among staff, and we're mean to each other too. But that's an entirely separate convo that could take all day LOL. Story 3. Pharmacy tech. When people realize they can't get their pain meds for whatever reason, it's bad. I'm surprised pharmacies don't have security low. Story 4. Slaughterhouse, nurse, doctor, anything that has to do with blood, I'd probably faint every time. Hemophobia sucks. Story 5. There is absolutely no way you will get me to work with children. I don't dislike kids, but I also don't want to be around kids all day. I don't do well in noisy environments. They would dislike it, I would dislike it, and the parents would dislike it. Let's save everyone from that. Story 6. Any sales job. In order to do such a job, you have to be able to convince the other person that the product service is something they want. And since I consider 99 of all those kinds of items shoot, that's impossible for me. Story 7. Call center rep for internet providers. You'd rather live in a cave than explain to strangers for 8 hours why their Wi-Fi isn't working. Story 8. I would do some humiliating, degrading shoot for $10K a month, but I have a friend who welds the insides of septic tanks, and I think that one is beyond me. Story 9. 10 kilimo is not that much. Yes, it is above the median salary in the US, but it's not high enough for this question. It's probably like 70th percentile, just guessing. Story 10. Technical support call center. I worked as tech support at a call center for 8 years, and it was the single most mentally damaging job I've ever had. I regularly received passing threats, people threatening to RPE me, being told women can't be in technical support because they're too stupid, etc. Then add on to that, having to track KPI metrics and being told you aren't empathetic enough, because if you were, you could have calmed down the person who immediately started screaming profanities at you as soon as you picked up the phone. There is no amount of money in the world that would ever make me work in a call center again. Story 11. Oh, this is easy because I've actually made this choice. I'd rather starve to passing under a bridge than work for CVS. Fortunately, it didn't come to that, but it could have, and I would still be sure I made the right choice. Story 12. 120K is a comfortable upper middle class job in much of the US, but not a crazy amount in NYC, Boston, or San Francisco. Story 13. I don't know if that's a job, but being in the Army, just know. I know it's glorified, but people there are not actually free. Story 14. Government job. It would suck knowing you could be let go from a high-paying job with good benefits because of what some idiot president decides to do. I personally know at least one person who was cut from a gov job after spending 8 years in college, spending a lot of time, money getting certified for it, working there for almost 20 years. Story 15. Well, 10K month would be a massive pay cut, so I wouldn't take any job for that amount if it were 10K day. Nothing could convince me to be a fluffer in the adult film industry or a male adult worker serving male clients, LOL. Story 16. Executioner in federal or state prisons. Whether it's the one who throws the switch, pulls the trigger, springs the trap door, inserts the needle, or drops the gas capsule. Story 17. Bioengineered virus tester. Whether it's COVID 2.0 or a viral gene resequencing kind of thing, the answer is no. Story 18. I'm surprised nobody mentioned the weapon industry. I would never work directly or indirectly for them. Story 19. Any job involving harm to animals. No amount of money would make that emotionally sustainable for me. Story 20. Sewer plant scuba diver. Even in a sealed suit, diving in a tank of liquid human waste with zero visibly and manually cleaning clogs sounds awful. Even if I only had to dive one day a month, I would need a lot more than 10,000 to 9. Story 21. I don't know. I think I would do most job with that monthly income. It is about threefold of my actual income. It would help solve a lot of problems. Fudge I could eliminate for such a lot of money. Story 22. I saw a Science magazine post about some unpopular jobs in science. Among them were bull and pig semen collector. Ew. I would need at least 20,000 per month. Story 23. That's not much money if you live near a big city, unless you mean after taxes, insurance, 401k, etc. So most jobs. Story 24. Content checker for social medias like Facebook, Twitter, etc. The amount of violation, manslaughter, torture, and so much more makes all people leave with PTSD. Story 25. Anything with a medical insurance company or working for any type of crisis birth center or some such hog shit organization that pretends to offer vulnerable women health care, but is actually a front for some overzealous religious group so they can lie to, manipulate, and bully people out of getting necessary abortions or birth control. I've been offered a job at one near me several times, and I told them that I would rather have a job wiping Saddam Hussein's jerk. Story 26. I was offered a position at 10K a month to care for a medically fragile baby that was expected to be high needs for the rest of their life, low tone so challenges with normal functioning. It's a 247 position with no respite except through qualified respite care providers through the state. I declined. That's a huge responsibility and zero time off. Story 27. Third shift. I already did that with the supermarket back in 2003. I dislike having to work midnight to 8 a.m. Story 28. My old job from like 4 years ago. I made less than half that at the time, but I'd need way more than that to put up with the owner of that shoot business. Story 29. COVID nurse in rural area in 2021. I took that job and paid for 3 months and left despite them wanting me to continue. Never again. Some things aren't worth any amount of money. Story 30. Can't believe I haven't seen anyone mention saturation diving. There's so many oil rig horror stories, but also even with nothing going wrong, it sounds like hell. Story 31. Probably like a job where I have to punch puppies or something. Would not do that for any amount of money. Story 32. Substances dealer. People without connections to Mexico have no idea how brutal the cartels are. Intimacy trafficking, torture, violation, extortion, kidnapping, and of course, eliminate. I grew up in a town where it was totally normal for people I knew to disappear without trace and be found hung from the side of a bridge. I wouldn't take a dime from those fuckers. In the US, low-level substances dealers are so mentally separated from it that they have no real understanding of what they are funding. Hundreds of thousands of deaths that they've counted, even more that they haven't. Story 33. 10,000 a month isn't that much, dude. That's 120K a year. That's middle class. There are a lot of totally normal jobs that many people wouldn't take for 10K a month. Story 34. Ice Goon. Accountability is coming, and I imagine it's going to be rough being one of the unmasked when it does. Story 35. I like how the question is for even 10K a month. That's 120K a year. Not exactly multi-millionaire territory. A lot of jobs pay that now, at least in this country. Story 36. A scammer factory. Like those places in India where they hire out whole office floors and have 100 people scamming 247. Story 37. My current job, I make more than that, but probably anything that involves artificially inseminating animals. Story 38. Corrections. I worked in juvie for about 2 months. They didn't tell me it was a juvenile center until I took the job and went to start. By then I had no other options. Quit as soon as I found a new job. It was awful. Not the kids, though. The staff there were borderline abusive, made horrible jokes that showed how little they cared if anything bad happened to the kids, like joking about how they should go about unaliving themselves. And they were terrible supervisors. One told me, and I quote, "You have too much school," when I brought up a psychology idea. God, I wanted to quit on the spot almost every day. My only regret is that I didn't say fudge you guys. I'm done when they made those awful jokes. I get it. They did bad things. They're criminals, whatever. But they are boys under 21. Most of them were well under 18. Pretty sure 90 of them had some horrific trauma that led them to this. I'm still at the job I left them for, and it's 50,000x better. Story 39. Honestly, you'd take any job if it means I earn. Work is work, and I believe discipline and mindset matter more than the title. If it puts food on the table and fuels my goals, I'll own it. Story 40. Anything related to height scaffolding, climbing big jerk towers to replace bulbs or fix things, etc. Story 41. Anything to do with ICE or CBP. Actually got recruited for CBP after my last layoff and declined not least of all because they were offering half the money that I was making, which was already on the lower end of what someone with my position and experience should be making. Story 42. Even for $120K a year before taxes, dislike to break it to you, but that's not what it used to be, LOL. That's a living wage in some states these days. Story 43. ICE. For no sum of money could I sleep peacefully, knowing that I was destroying innocent people's lives. People who have truly suffered to be where they are, sacrificed immensely to build a new life, and want nothing more than to exist in peace. Aside from that, there aren't many jobs I wouldn't do for that sum, as long as they don't hurt people or animals. I'm a little terrified of the ocean, so I think I draw the line at undersea welding. Make it $20,000 a month and I'd consider it. Story 44. Fatberg Miner, and as someone else said, ICE agent is a big no for me. Not sure which is more disgusting. Story 45. IDF, American military contractor in Gaza, or any other job participating in genocide. I wouldn't do it for all the money in the world every second until the end of time, all paid up front. Story 46. Sales, animal takedown or cruelty or experimentation. Any current White House staff position or reporting to anybody Trump appointed, especially ICE or deportations. Story 47. Radio tower light bulb changer guy. They make a lot IRC, but no amount of safety harness, carabiners, and a parachute can get me to climb a 20F ladder. Told my ex-GF about my fear of height. She got me to try and watch those helmet cam videos. Nah, I got queasy and sweaty. Very anxious, my thighs and jerk cheeks felt like a vibrator was inside them. Ground floor at hotels is a requirement for travel. Story 48. That's not that much money. I like the job I have. There are plenty that'd pass on even for more money. Story 49. 10K in gross or net pay. 10K before all the payroll taxes, federal and state income taxes, 401K deductions, translates to only $160 a month. Story 50. At this point, any job paying that much, and most minimum wage jobs. God bless our healthcare employees because I sure as hell need them, but could never do that myself. The smells alone. They 120K net year, which is pretty typical for management, tech, manual jobs with lots of overtime, etc., is not that rare nowadays. Story 51. Collections, stockbroker, corrections officer, police officer, basically any profession that requires you to compromise your soul, actively worsen the world, or oppress marginalized people. Story 52. I mean, the natural progression from my current career would get me there, and that's just being a commercial construction project manager. I'd need way more than 120K a year to want to put up with that bullshit. Story 53. Police officer. I simply do not have the patience to be one. I would end up shooting some scumbag or entitled jerk within the first week. Story 54. I think this question assumes that 10 grand is a lot of money for people, and you have to understand that there's a lot of people where 10 grand a month would be considered a demotion or pay cut. Perfect example would be some of the people who work in tech. Their answer would be that they would simply not accept any job for only 10 grand because they're probably going to be making more already. Story 55. Anything in retail, in an office, or which otherwise involves spending the day with large numbers of people, including commuting on public transport. Story 56. Overnight anything. The hours and difficulty with sleep or having a life outside of work, it's just too much. I don't care how much it would make. Story 57. 10K is the bare minimum I'd need to support myself and my Sam and 4 little kiddos. Anything less and would eventually run out of money. So to that I'd say I couldn't afford to take any job that paid less than 120K net a year. Story 58. Working in a pipe yard, spent a week or so at a job, and almost died 3 times I was younger, and should have known better than to stand up on a giant stack of pipe that was frozen and kick these 30-foot-long pipes down the line to load up on the loader. One thing goes wrong, and it turns into a literal blender, shooting out pipes and wood chunks from the supports everywhere. Other times, some guys who I think were tipsy loading drilling rods into a shipping container, I had to manually move them while hanging from their portable crane truck so they could all fit. Fuckers thought it was super funny swinging 10K pounds worth of pipe back and forth to fudge with me while I was in there. Went into boss, told him this job wasn't worth me dying, and quit on the spot, called the crane company as well, and from what I heard, after they both got fired as well and failed their substances and adult beverage test. Story 59, sales, retail, restaurant server. Basically anywhere I have to deal with the general public in a service capacity. Story 60, I know a guy whose job was looking through evidence, photos, and videos from child-adult content cases, intimacy abuse cases, etc. I'd never do that. Not even for billions of dollars a month. Story 61. Maintaining radio tower light bulbs. I don't even like climbing a step ladder to change my AC filter. Story 62. Weekly cleaning of vault toilets in the summer travel season at popular state parks. I'm not talking just restocking TP and wiping things down. There's a pressurized hose you stick in there and use some nasty chemicals to cut through the crap, and the whole time, those poop chemical fumes knock you out. You can smell it from a few tents away all day. Now, would I go inside and hang out inside a vault toilet for $10,000? I'd consider it. Story 63. Gong farmer. The people who cleaned out cesspits and latrines in the Middle Ages by wading sometimes neck-deep in sewage to remove human waste. They were also called nightmen because their work was considered so offensive to the senses that they had to work at night. Mortality rates were fairly high due to obvious things like infection and diseases from being constantly covered in piss and shoot, but also because they would occasionally be overcome by fumes and drown in sewage. Story 64. Underwater welding, bro. That Delta P chute is terrifying. The decompression chamber and the diving bell is scary too. Also, whatever job title that is, that requires you to toggle a switch that may or may not induce an arc flash. Story 65. Pretty much anything that puts me behind a desk or working 9 to 5. I already make more than that as a paramedic, and I get 20 full days off per month and never have the same shift twice. Story 66. Depends on whether 10K and job security is dependent on actual performance, because it'd be god-awful at sales. I assume you have to actually try at the job for it to count, even if you're bad at it. If the result is going to be a couple awkward days and immediate termination, then there's no point in taking it anyway. Past that, it would be slaughterhouse. Story 67. Firefighter. One of my close friends just finished training, and he said if you throw up inside your suit, you have to eat it. I think the reason has something to do with air displacement. Anyway, that's a pass for me. Mad respect for any firefighters out there, though. Story 68. Of all jobs, and for only $120K while living in the U.S., probably half of all jobs are on the NOPE list and half are in the SURE list. 120K USD and living in Myanmar? The NOPE list gets very short. Story 69. It's not really a lot of money these days. Supporting a family on an annual salary of $120,000 is basically poverty living, at least where I am, suburbs of a major U.S. city. Story 70. ITT. Lots of thankless jobs, many of which are very needed. We'll say I couldn't be a Nazi anytime remotely close to 1939, 1945. Story 71. Okay, but 10 Kenemanipino is like just barely a 6-figure salary. Like 15 of the country already makes that. It's a lot of money, but not like a lot. I imagine there are lots of things people wouldn't do at that price point. A more interesting question, Mo, is for all the people who gave answers here, how high the compensation would have to be in order for them to change their mind and take that job. Story 72. 120K a year is a pretty polarizing figure in the U.S. It's not going to impress professionals. It's going to impress a lot of people starting out in service food industry. I reckon people in retail hospitality would do anything for 120K because they're already doing it for way less with shoot or no benefits. Story 73. I make almost that as a software consultant and reached a breaking point last month. Came up with a plan to quit and go to school, how we can afford things, etc. I didn't get any support from my friends and family, though, who only see what I'm giving up. So I guess I'll just work here until I can retire early and regret wasting my able-bodied years for extra long. Story 74. Healthcare administration, including and most especially healthcare insurance. I'd feel sick going to work every day. Story 75. Any cleaning or janitorial position in a school or retail environment. Kids and customers are the absolute worst at cleaning up after themselves. Story 76. Any medical role, like knowing that a mistake could end up making someone die from something that could have been avoided, sounds like too much weight on my shoulders. Story 77. Nearly every job that pays $10,000 a month. No stress, no exploitation of others, no 40-hour work week, nothing I find useless to others or the world. I have a great job now caring for disabled kids. I get near nothing. It's the best. Story 78. Restaurant manager. I used to work in hospitality, and I did some shifts that were so bad the manager would spend a couple of hours just going from table to table, dealing with complaints. Fudge that, I'd end up cracking and just telling people to fudge off. Story 79. Parking enforcement or government bureaucrat whose job involves putting red tape in front of people trying to build. Story 80. Telemarketing. I am so sorry for the people who suffer in that job and get humiliated by people all day because none of us like telemarketing calls while it is their livelihood. It is irrelevant, but I already make much more than that. Story 81. Any job. I would take any job. 1 year of hell would pay off the house. 2 years would cushion me through a lot of life's problems. Story 82. I have a friend who used to work as a corrections officer in a federal prison, and he said it was the most emotionally and spiritually draining job he ever had. With that being said, I don't think this job would ever be a good fit for me, no matter how well it paid. Story 83. Any blue-collar work near water, specifically welders and constructors, builders. Pay those beautiful people twice more than they're getting IDGEF. Hardest job. Change my mind. I'd rather work nights in the ER than service underwater pipes. Story 84. 911 operator. High stress, literal life or passing situations. You may be hearing someone's last moments. There are just some things money can't fix, like the absolute mental burden that job can carry. I have so much respect for 911 operators. Story 85. Medical assistant in military said removing anal warts was not worth any amount. Taking his word for it. Just saying removing rectum raisins is a no for me. Story 86. It's not like you have to be good at it. Work in a slaughterhouse. Let that cattle run. Health insurance executive. Everyone gets what they need with the exception of health insurance execs. Story 87. Veterinarians have a very high tragic end rate. It seems like a tough job because of the money part of the job. Story 88. At this time, pretty much any government job. It was already stressful enough as an engineer, but now it's just fudge asinine. It was like trying to move a brick wall by yourself with no tools while it's falling apart. Now it's that, but there's an annoying kid poking you in the side repeatedly. Another kid is stealing money from your wallet while smiling. You're late for an appointment, surrounded by salesmen trying to sell you timeshares, and a cop walks up to you and asks if you're going to be a problem, and a bunch of Karens are yelling to arrest you being too loud. Fudge, no. Story 89. 10,000 a month isn't really that much money. It's like 60 hour. It's not nothing, but it's not like you'll be owning a yacht or anything like that. Story 90. Working cleaning windows or skyscrapers or doing construction jobs at high altitudes. I don't get the people that get a rush by climbing those for fun. Story 91. Not being a rich male body part or anything, but $12,000 a month isn't all that much in a lot of the US. Story 92. Shoot, I make $10K a month on a med job. But ironically, you'd take all sorts of jobs for less if they paid at least close. Story 93. Joining ICE or anything immigration enforcement related. I don't want to be a part of Gestapo 2.0. What they are doing is heinous. Story 94. Food service. Did it. Dislike it. Sales. I couldn't sell a parachute to someone who just fell out of a plane. Story 95. Before taxes, I already earn more than that as a destructive test engineer. So if you want me to take the 10K, it would have to be one hell of a fun job. Story 96. A 9-to-5 job. I don't want to be stuck in a loop. Seen that video where the guy graduates and he gets a job of just standing on a footpath and not moving? He makes money, but after 40 wires of standing in one place, his life just skipped by him. Story 97. K-pop idol like any member of BTS. Zero privacy. Everything you do is documented. Can't go anywhere without attracting a crowd and constantly working on your craft. They make way more than $10,000 a month. Story 98. I don't know what the job title is, but there's someone that has to wank off pigs for a living. I'm probably not into that. Story 99. Hey, OP, having worked in the gambling industry before, no amount of money would tempt me back. So I've seen what it can do to people, and the guilt would be too much. Story 100. Having worked my way to a pretty good job, there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't do for $120K a year. It's a good salary, but not that good. Story 101. On-call correctional service crisis management team. It's what you think it is. It's disgusting wet work with the worst scumbags. Batons, handcuffs, restraints, and it's dangerous as fudge. Story 102. I was a customer service manager at a super target for a few years. I won't even step foot in that business anymore. I dislike it so much. Story 103. Cop ECE scumbag. Corrections officer. I had a buddy who worked at Rikers. Told me how much overtime he made, great benefits, holidays, etc. Then he explained how part of his job was to have inmates bend over and spread their cheeks and cough so he could look up their jerk to check for contraband. Yeah, no. Story 104. I would take just about any job for $10K a month. There is a whole big list of them I wouldn't be able to keep though. Story 105. Anything harder than what I'm doing now. I work on an assembly line, but it's pretty laid back. Right now, I bring home more than that, but work 70, 80 hours a week. Story 106. IDF soldier. I could never eliminate an innocent child to advance the interests of a genocidal ideology. Story 107. I just walked away from a job interview after the third round because I realized it was a cult. It would have paid about that much. So my answer is working on behalf of a cult. Story 108. Probably one of those jobs at sea, like where you gotta dive super deep or work somewhere in the middle of the ocean on an oil rig. The ocean is absolute nightmare fuel for me. Story 109. Any kind of blue-collar work. Back-breaking, soul-crushing work for mediocre pay seems pretty horrible. Story 110. Anything that's going to cause me pain in 30 years. I don't want to ruin my body when I can do something I love for more than half the salary. Story 111. Land surveyor assistant in Alberta. It's one of the most humiliating jobs ever. You're basically alone in the woods with an angry tyrant called a land surveyor. They're constantly yelling at you, berating you, urging you to move faster. The land surveyor can scream at you as they please. There is nobody around to witness their behavior. If you ever complain, the land surveyor will call the project manager, and the project manager will politely ask you to pack your bags and leave. You're immediately replaceable. Your duties include being a personal therapist, gas station attendant, pack mule, equipment setup, holding a prism pole very steadily, digging holes, flagging trees, cleaning up the truck, being honked at, listening to awful country music in the truck during long car rides. The job sites are hundreds of kilometers from the city. The land surveyor likely smokes, so you'll freeze your face off when they roll down the window and it's cold outside. To make things worse, Muskeg, 40C weather, mosquitoes, bees, your gloves get damp and freeze over. You have to replace your gloves every 3 hours, 12-hour days, no breaks, 244 shifts, hourly salary, so you're basically broke during the slow months when the snow melts and the private roads are muddy. Story 112. Analyst for exploited children at the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. They have to review reports, which means viewing the material itself before sending to the proper authorities. They literally have a health and psychology team on standby for them at all times. They can work for over the designated time frame and are required to attend mandatory counseling sessions. And that's just a few of the protocols for their mental health. Where I work, they have forwarded links to us for review remove, and just reading the links have haunted me. As a father, I couldn't imagine looking through those pictures every day. Story 113. Road paving. I saw a road crew, and they were just standing around hot asphalt, breathing in the fumes. I got a headache just from quickly walking past that asphalt. Some of those people are probably going to get lung cancer, which is one of the worst cancers to have, and would wipe out any savings they made from their job. Story 114. Considering I make about that right now and get 12 weeks of year of PTO, I'd say you couldn't entice me away for twice that money. Story 115. Sales. I refuse to be pushy or lie to make a sale. People will buy if they want. If they don't, they won't. Story 116. How about the one I have now? Shoot, even if you bumped my pay 5x, I still would rather do something else that actually interests me. Story 117. 10K a month isn't even that much. That's 120K a year. In a couple states like Massachusetts, that's the minimum to live comfortably, not some outlandish number that might justify a horrible job. Story 118. After being in the industry for a bit, 10K a month still isn't enough to deal with managing construction sites. Subcontractors who don't show up when they are supposed to, suppliers lying about material availability and lead times, owners changing their mine budget every 5 seconds, architects and engineers forgetting details or specifications, and then blaming you until you prove it to them, then being told to figure it out so it doesn't make them look incompetent. All this while 3 other people are all wanting the same result on the same project, but not willing to cooperate or communicate because they just want to do it themselves. I go home more stressed out and irritated than the day before, more often than anything else. And I don't bring home even close to half that. So extra not worth it. Story 119. Anything involving puke. I can clean up poop messes all day without making a face, but puke is where I draw the line. Story 120. Sales, cold calls. I did opinion research in college, a now defunct way of collecting surveys. Absolute mental burnout from reading the script over and over. Story 121. Roofing, or anything concerning heights actually, but especially tarring flat roofs. The smell alone is sickening. Edit for words. Autocorrect struck again. Story 122. Police or ICE agent. Those heroes do so much to protect communities and get rid of illegals, yet they're vilified by the public and are assaulted. Story 123. I don't do retail or sales, neither of which would pay such an amount. The rest I could handle, I think. I'm a fast learner. Story 124. Fast food. That was my first job, and that will be the last time I ever do it. I'd rather be homeless than work in fast food ever. Story 125. Highline electric line connector. They climb those long-distance electrical lines to repair them. Though I believe they make a hell of a lot more than $10K a month. Those lines have like 1,000 volts running through them. Story 126. Anything eliminate animals. I couldn't do it. Working in lush as I'd get horrific migraines, or working with spiders. Story 127. Most to 120K pa is a significantly lower salary than some people already get with decent jobs, so probably better asking at 10K per week. I'd consider moving to the USA for work at those rates, but I'd be out of there in 5 years to comfortably retire elsewhere. Story 128. For $10,000 a month, that's less than what I currently make. To take a job for that pay, it would have to be fully remote with flexible hours. Story 129. Well, any job that $10K a month would be undervalued. Software developer, doctor, pharmacist, etc. All of those make more than $120K a year, so I would never do the job for below market rate. Story 130. I wouldn't take a job for that amount at all. I make that in about 50 hours as a self-employed person. Story 131. That guy who is testing those sticks that goes inside of your male body part. I think I would not take that one. Story 132. Probably most jobs. I wouldn't take a job as a brain surgeon because I don't know how to perform surgery, so I'd be fired or jailed. Not worth it. Story 133. There aren't many jobs that I wouldn't at least try for $120K a year. I'm sure there are at least a few that I wouldn't do, but I can't think of any. Story 134. I make that on a slow month. Quite honestly, my wife and I joke, the times when we made just over minimum wage in the 90s was some of the best years of our lives. Most memorable and funnest jobs. At least for me it was. My wife worked at Kmart and Taco Bell while I was doing car audio. What wouldn't I do for $50K a month? What my brother does, a California professional firefighter. He is mentally scarred to and through after doing it for 30 wires. Story 135. Are we thinking 10K is a lot? That's 120K. Better than average, but still only in the top 20 of US full-time earners. Maybe it goes further in other countries. Story 136. 10K a month is 120K a year. Not that much. I quit a job that paid that because it was in the dairy industry, and I started to learn too much about dairy cows and how horrible it all is. I'm not vegan, but at least I'm not profiting off animal exploitation anymore. Story 137. Health insurance rep. I've been on the side of having to fight insurance and to literally having to tell someone that we can't help them when they're not asking for something unreasonable would make me sick. Story 138. Don't know the correct English term, but jobs involving either sperm extraction or sperm insemination for farm animals like pigs, cows, and similar. Story 139. Those poor investigators that work child-adult content cases. Having to sift through the absolute worst that humanity has to offer for evidence would destroy me. Story 140. Anything where I could have to clean up adult poop. Sorry, all my respect to those of you who do it, but my gag reflex says no. Story 141. It's hard to imagine I couldn't tough out any type of job for that salary. I'm sure there's a few, though. I can't handle any gross medical condition, so I guess doctor or surgeon. Story 142. Lol, I made $12K a month working at a company that rhymes with Mini Network and quit with nothing lined up. Story 143. Prostitute. It is illegal, and it is also not worth the SD risk. That, and I would not want to share any of it with a pimp. Story 144. Teacher. All they get is grief from their administrators, students, and parents. Worse, every year politicians come up with every increasing ways to make their lives more miserable, e.g., No Child Left Behind, Williams Act, etc. They're expected to teach their subject matter in different ways for each and every student in their class. Meeting individual needs while acting like surrogate parents, social workers, psychologists, medical professionals, family counselors, Rambo in case of a school shooting, entertainers, babysitters, etc. Story 145. Utilization reviewer. A lot of physical therapists leaving direct patient care end up in these jobs, but I don't understand how you can go from daily fights with insurance companies to being a part of the insurance company. We all know you're not changing them from the inside, so you're definitely complex. Story 146. Working the pharmacy counter at my local CVS. Just standing in line having to listen while waiting to pick up my meds gives me PTSD. Story 147. Funeral home director reasons. 3. Dead bodies. 2. Fighting bickering families. 1. Kids. 10K. 10T. Doesn't matter. I'm not burying a kid. Story 148. Being a parent so I'd rather die. Obligatory edit. Parents and kids are great. It's just not for me. Story 149. Cleaning out septic tanks. A job that regularly exposed me to the current POTUS, an oral hygienist for people with the worst breath, etc. Story 150. Anything to do with sales. If it was a product service I believed in, and it was more helping people who wanted to buy to make a choice rather than trying to sell to them, then maybe. But straight up, sales, nah. Too introverted. Anything to do with handling dead bodies or parts. Yeesh. Too squeamish. Anything that mostly deals with insects. Insects are my phobia. I have built up some tolerance with years of gardening, but if you offered me a plate of bugs to eat for millions of dollars or 10 more years of life, I would choose to die sooner and poorer. Story 151. Coroner. I feel faint just giving myself shots or seeing blood. Having to perform autopsies on dead people all the time, some who suffered gruesome wounds or abuse, or maybe children, makes me want to puke up every organ in my body. Story 152. Any split shift job that combines very early starts and very late finishes. Example, already did a split shift job, 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. one week, then 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. another week. To make it worse, on the early shift, I often had to start at 5 a.m., and on the late shift, I often finished at midnight all the way to 2 a.m. in the morning. Long-term result, messed up mental health, messed up work-home life balance, and elevated danger to health. On several occasions, I almost had a major road accident due to tiredness. Lastly, in 10K is not even worth it, since you can use the money due to being constantly exhausted in your brief time off from work. Story 153, FBI agent RN. Probably are on Gestapo orders to hail the Chief Orange One, Brain Cell Garfield, while he's on his way to McDonald's before tea time. Story 154. Pharmaceutical sales. Evil people. Profit over care. Turned down 6 figures in the 90s because of this. Story 155. Divorce family law attorney. Who would want to deal with that stress and conflict every day? If you've ever been through an adult major divorce breakup, imagine dealing with that every day for work. P.S. I don't like attorneys. I'm not pro-attorney. I just think that job would be horrible. Story 156. I feel like your number's a little low. There are all sorts of jobs I wouldn't do for $120K a year. Does my job count? Chemistry technician for a power plant. Final answer. I would not take this job. I'm working now for less money than I currently make. Story 157. Field service planner. Never again. Coordinating over 40 in the field engineers who call nonstop, even though their next tasks are already on the tablet, well before they're even finished. Yet they keep insisting on calling me to ask what to do next. Story 158. Debt collector. I worked for a law firm company that collected debt owed to the attorneys. Worst fudge job of my life. I've never cried so much for complete strangers. Story 159. This isn't some flex or anything, but 10K a month sound exactly a huge amount of money to sacrifice your happiness for. There's a ton of jobs I wouldn't do for that. Now, if you were to say 100K a month, then I think it whittles down to any sort of intimacy work and anything where I'd have to sacrifice my dignity and couldn't show my face to my family. Story 160. Retail. Never again. Shoot you not. Can I rent 2 bags of ice for 2 ARs? I just need it to keep my fish cold until I get back to the hotel. Story 161. I made 6 figures selling cars at a large dealership group in the Midwest. I worked 8 to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday and never saw my family. I dreaded weekends because I always had 5 or 6 appointments on Friday, Saturday. My kids were growing up without me, and my girlfriend, fiancée, was growing apart from me. I left that job to get back into the manufacturing field, and I now buy-sell stainless steel, aluminum, copper, bronze, alloys, etc. from 80 to 430 MF. I make about 40 less per year. My sons are fudge awesome. One just started 3rd grade and the other his freshman year. I just married the woman mentioned above, and I could not possibly be happier. Story 162. I sleep better. I poop better. My blood sugars are better. My hypertension is better. My social life is worse. I make less, but I also spend less because I'm not constantly trying to compensate for bad days. I'm more focused. I'm also more challenged, and some days are harder. I like to show up early. I still dislike staying late. I used to work in finance. Now I'm a nurse. Answer. Also worked in finance, investment banking, so 100-hour weeks, shoot mentally abusive managers, cutthroat environment, etc. Really took a toll on my body and mental health, so after a couple of years, I quit. Now I'm a software engineer and my life is a million times better. Of course, I had to work hard to learn how to code and land a job as an outsider, which was stressful in of itself, but it was worth it. I do sometimes wonder how much I'd be making now if I had just sucked it up and grinded through the finance life, but I think I wouldn't be in a mentally great spot if I stayed. Plus, I think I would have eventually become everything that I dislike about my managers just by exposure. Story 163. Worked as an attorney, quit to be a teacher. It was okay for a while, but years later it's bad. I'm poor and terrified that I will be poor forever. Answer. I'm leaving teaching to become an attorney BC. I'm tired of being broke. Everyone says I'll regret it. I'm sorry to hear having a rough time, but you have made me feel better, so thank you, LOL. As others have said, I am sure there are SPED opportunities that would pay more, or you could even look for one of those instructional coach jobs. Everyone will despise the sight of you, but at least you'll get paid more and do basically nothing. Godspeed. Story 164. Went from corporate IT to residential concierge, handyman for rich people. Couldn't be happier. 61 years old and semi-retired. Clients instead of managers, lots of referrals. Make my own schedule and cruise from job to job, listening to 80s music on Spotify. Story 165. I am on that edge now. Financially, I am very well off right now, but I dislike my job. This December, the house is paid off. My partner and I will start thinking about our remaining future, beginning next year. The 2-3 a month less is a big hitter, though. Answer. My personal suggestion, I suppose if you reduce it to the simplest form, is just to do your job much more poorly. I mean that a little tongue-in-cheek, of course. I found my issue was more so that I felt compelled to work around the clock, to always produce beyond my coworkers, and to otherwise make myself seem the best. And when I broke that down, I found that was mostly all just my pride. There's probably a huge gap between what you currently produce versus what the lowest producer produces, and yet they're still employed. So maybe just shoot for a little bit above that person so that you keep the pay, but gain the satisfaction of life, or at least it balances a bit better. It took some time, but I'm content with that balance. Story 166. I didn't exactly quit it for happiness. I quit it to take care of my mom. I left a job as an SRE at Google, which paid well, and took an academic staff software engineering job, which paid crap. My mom made it 4 more years, and I got to spend them all with her, and it was the best decision I could have made. I'm back to what I was making in 2012 and plan to retire in a year or 2. She was a good person, and I miss her, but I'm glad I got that time with her. She was my career counselor, and she willed me a good bit of money, so there's honestly no level I regret that decision. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner. Story 167. This thread TLDR. People who left with a financial cushion of some kind. I don't make as much, but I'm happier. People who did not, I regret it every day. Story 168. Left the oil gas industry as it was soul-sucking, and was spending like 300 days a year on a drill rig, making like half what I used to, but I was single and depressed, now married and have a young son. Wish I had more money, but am much happier than I used to be with my life. Lots of money is nice. Good memories are nicer. Answer. What career did you find yourself in after? I've worked a service rig, think they're called workover rigs in the US, for like a month when I was 18, and said fudge that and quit. Completely soul-sucking work. Just curious, because I live in an oil and gas town, and majority people working them have criminal records, no education, or no ambition for something better. After I left, I landed myself a job doing NDT, X-raying fab and pipelines. Similar hours to rigs, but workload is way more manageable. Story 169. Took a pay cut from a well-paying job that I was bored out of my mind at. Some days I regret the decision and think I could have coasted for 20 more years, but overall happy I left because that would have been a long 20 years. Story 170. My husband quit his high-paying job, I say it that way because money is all relative, in December because we bought a house in a completely different area. We knew he would be quitting and had a little money saved up. We did all the math and cut our bills as much as possible. He started job searching at the beginning of the year, just as the economy went into WTF tariff mode, which made finding a job nearly impossible for him. He went from having a career, massive amounts of stress, and making almost $100K a year to working in a slightly shoot job, making 13 HR with pretty much no stress. If he shows up and does his job, he gets Employee of the Month, and we don't fight about tiny things anymore. Sure, I can't just drop 60 on the little handheld gaming console I want from Amazon, and we're first-time homeowners, which has its own stress, but I got my darn husband back. As long as the mortgage is paid and we have food in the fridge, we'll be okay. Story 171. I quit a poor-paying job for an even worse-paying job. My mental health is tons better. All my sleep problems have gone. I fall asleep quickly and wake feeling well-rested. I'm calmer, less irritable. My IBS symptoms have significantly improved for the first time in 10 years. But on the flip side, I am now poor as shoot. Holidays are no longer a reality. A takeout is maybe once every 6 months. My days off have to be spent doing something very cheap-free, either at home or somewhere I can walk. When my 17-year-old car inevitably breaks, I won't be replacing it and will have to walk or cycle everywhere. Also, with how bad the pension payments are on a low wage, I'm pretty concerned about what quality of life my future self is going to have. Overall, life feels a fair bit less enjoyable now, but a whole lot more calm. Story 172. I quit being a Delta flight attendant. After a decade of alcoholism and 0 relationships, am 3 years sober, in a loving relationship and have a dog. Couldn't be happier. Story 173. Like everything else, it's an imperfect decision. I was a rising star at an elite under-the-radar private tutoring college admissions fixing firm. Had clients I only saw on Zoom who lived places like Panama and the Arab Gulf. Had clients with truly opulent homes in South Florida. I made lawyer money flipping Tulane into Duke and Michigan into Harvard. After a few years of doing that, I came to loathe my bosses, who not only took a huge portion of my gross hourly fees, but who spoke with a real social Darwinism about the working class and the salaried upper middle class. Man, people who did not have inherited wealth or who made only about $250 a year. Many of the kids and their families were genuinely appreciative, even. But the bad families and the rude students weren't simply frustrating. They made me want to start the communist revolution right there on the edge of Biscayne Bay. I quit the job when my family moved to a new part of the country. My bosses screamed at me for damaging the brand, and my once close co-workers promptly forgot my name and phone number. Stayed at home for 2 years to be the primary parent with our children, then became a regular school teacher at a very gentle, very laid-back private school in our area. Yes, I make 13 of what I used to, and without my wife's salary, we would have had a major downgrade in lifestyle. But going from essentially being Michael Clayton, but for getting Addison into Yale, to an adult who can help teenagers engage with the ancient Greek tragedies and the contemporary poetry of Rita Dove and Jory Graham feels fudge incredible. Story 174. I was a mortgage loan officer back in 2022 when I quit. 100 commission. Made the most money I've ever made, but worked every minute of the day, 7 days a week. Mindless work. My job used to preach work-life integration, which I now see was manipulation. I quit and took a job with my state government, making a lower salary, but I have my life back now. Am much happier and am actually using my college degree rather than kissing real estate agents jerk all day every day. Story 175. I quiet quit. I wouldn't say I have a high-paying job, but I'm comfortable. I busted my jerk to be a top performer and got a 2 raise as a reward. So I no longer go out of my way to do extra work. I don't keep every minute of my day busy. I listen to audiobooks, do my homework, going for my master's, take some time to go outside in my garden, and I spend time growing plant substance as well. Legal in MN, I don't recommend breaking the law, lol. I'm much happier now. Eventually, I may look for a higher paying job, but right now I'm coasting. Story 176. Halved my salary but doubled my work and life satisfaction. Went from 5 days a week working at a desk, not wanting to get out of bed, and getting closer and closer to a mental breakdown, to cycling around the city, I love 5 days a week delivering coffee, pastries, and other things between businesses as a cargo bike rider. Would love a little more money, but I can't really complain when I think about where my mental health was before. Story 177. I quit my job, or rather, was asked to leave. I had some financial security, but truth is, I dislike every single working hour, and most of my colleagues too. For about 5 years, I was high on plant substance, 247. Before that, adult beverage was my main thing. Now I'm on pause. You will be on unemployment for a while, trying to figure out my life. To be honest, I don't feel much happier yet, but I guess 9 months sober from plant substance, 2 months off nicotine, and doing a lot of heavy shadow work has to count for something. What I do know is, if it kept going the way I was, I probably would have eliminated myself slowly with anger and substances. Answer: congratulations. As someone who has been sober of adult beverage substances for a year and a half, it gets easier and it's great for you. I also just got let go a week ago from a job I absolutely dislike everything about it and made me miserable for the past 6 months. Was working over 10 shifts with the worst lazy coworkers. Funny enough, I feel relieved even though I still need to figure it out money now. I have been to 2 concerts this week so far and slowly regaining my life back. Might be a little thing, but I feel happier already. You will too, dear stranger. Story 178. Worked in investment banking. Fell in love. Left so I could build a relationship and do something different. She bailed on me the precise moment I ran out of money. Story 179. I was fired for refusing RTO order, but that's just semantics. I left my field to work in an adjacent one. I took a 40K pay cut, but instead of working in defense, I'm at a nonprofit I personally admire. If I didn't have VA disability, financially it would have been rough. I'm still paying my bills and saving, so the change of scenery remains great. Answer: good on you for refusing to return to the office. When I moved, the company I work for approved it, but said if we think there are problems at any point in the future, we'll give you plenty of notice to return to the office. I said, if that happens, you don't need to do anything but send a shipping label so I can return my laptop. I'm never coming back in. Everything is going well, thankfully. Requiring high-performing remote workers to return to the office is insanity, and some companies are doing that because they know it will result in attrition, so they don't have to lay anyone off. Story 180. I have worked in sales for 20 years now, made a lot of money doing it over the years, and had built up a skill set where I was selling 100K projects. Most sales teams are inherently toxic, whether it comes from a shoot sales guy on the team who makes enough management won't touch them, management itself and their sell it even if it's not right for the customer mindset, or the sales manager who thinks he is God's gift to sales and understands it better than anyone else in the world. His style will always be used car salesman. I quit everything and moved to Ecuador. I host karaoke twice a week, which covers my rent. Then I do odd jobs, help a buddy out at his store, and tutor a little online. I work about 15 hours a week, 4 of which would be a karaoke place I would be at, with or without pay. The other one, I'm only there because they pay me. I've never been happier. I'm well on my way to learning Spanish. While I still don't work out, my physical health probably hasn't been better in years. I'm more confident, more creative, more active, more social, and I just can't stop myself from being the weird little ADHD goblin I actually am. I didn't just quit, I planned my exit strategically and did exactly that. If anyone disliked their life, I recommend dramatically change it if you can. Story 181. Quit as a construction engineer to work in a warehouse. Couldn't stand the office life, meetings, clients, emails, writing reports, etc. Much happier working manual labor. I've always been very frugal, so despite the considerable pay cut, it hasn't affected my day-to-day life much. Except I don't spend all my free time dreading going to work anymore. Story 182. I went from stressing out about work to stressing out about money, but I'd rather be broke, stressed, own my time than constantly working for someone else with minimal time off. Story 183. I was a pharmacist, quit and went to a call center, dislike it, but moved to another department for service implementation, and I love it. Recently, I started working a few shifts a week as a floater pharmacist to help pay for home renovation projects, but it's still much better than full-time. Being a pharmacist in a retail environment was absolute hell, and this was pre-COVID. I damaged my mental health to the point of multiple breakdowns a week. Pay went from around 90K a year to 32K, then when I went up to 45K when I moved positions. Long story short, I'm the happiest I've ever been. Story 184. 2 stories. My high school English teacher used to be a family lawyer. He went into the profession thinking he could help families, coming from a broken family himself. Ended up doing divorces after divorces. Straw on camel's back was a drawing from a client's daughter. She still had hope that the family can have dinner together while they were finalizing the paperwork. My teacher is now vice principal of that school. He's still very happy that he's helping empower families, not breaking them. Life as a lawyer got rid of his mortgage, which helped a lot. I had a long work-related Uber ride. My driver used to be a publicly traded company's senior leadership. He quit before he became a chief executive. Even though he makes less than what he paid in taxes before, he enjoys talking to people and not have to worry about agenda. He loves not being in meetings. He's happy. Story 185. Great, but I was financially secure, so I didn't put my family at risk. I just retired. About 9 months later, I went back to work part-time at near minimum wage just to feel engaged. I love my life. Story 186. I quit my corporate role as a business unit manager for a top 3 aerospace giant where I was responsible for 100 min PL. The pay there way incredible, 250 total comp, but I was dying. I had a 1-hour commute through LA traffic each direction every day. Tons of domestic and overseas travel. I would scream at people at work several times per week, was responsible for firing numerous people, and I eventually started having a lot of problems sleeping, which led me to have several panic attacks, one of which was while driving home in heavy traffic. Finally, I had enough, and I quit suddenly after a particularly bad meeting. I took some time to figure out what to do with my life. I was living in a crazy expensive city in SoCal, with rent almost fork month. My expenses were sky high, and my nest egg wasn't going to last me very long at all. I wasn't sure what to do with my life, and immediately started regretting my decision to resign. After a few weeks, I decided to start my own business. I put all my stuff in a storage unit and became a so-called digital nomad. I moved to a much lower cost of living country for a while and floated from Airbnb to Airbnb. My first year, I didn't make anything, just paid my first employee. Year 2, I made a small profit, which was enough to live and keep traveling. I'm in year 4 now, and things are going pretty well. I split my time between South America and the West Coast. I bought an RV for my time in the States. I'm living pretty comfortably. My mental health is now at 100. I love my new life. I don't make as much as I used to, but I only spend a fraction of what I used to. No commute, no daily lunch at restaurant, no dry cleaning, etc. I'm also working for myself, which makes a big difference. Having no boss is amazing. I'm hopeful that after another year or 2, I might start making as much or more as I made previously, but time will tell. Even if this experiment fails, I'm so glad I tried. These have been some of the best years of my life. I feel free for the first time since I was young. Story 187. Less quit, more was let go, living my best life ever. Started my fitness journey, finally having the body of my 25YO. Self I've never had, got into freelancing, designing pod merch. Sure, there's less money available, living off my savings, but having lived frugally for most of my life, it might just work out until fire kicks in. Story 188. Walked away from 100K higher base pay in the private sector for an academic job that not only had lower base pay, but no true opportunity for bonuses, and life has been awesome. I moved past that private sector pay in 5 years, and because I was overqualified for the job I took, I moved up quickly and control my schedule. I thus have ultimate freedom. I make the schedule for the entire department, and now the only difference between what I am making in academics versus what I could be making in the private sector is 50K. We even have a bonus structure now, less than it would in the private sector, but still something. But my day is only 4 or 5 hours in the hospital while just communicating with residents and fellows over the phone because I live so close. I have to go back only if there are meeting or issues with patients. Story 189. My mom did it. She now is more stressed about finding an actual good paying. It was a high stress job. Now she went to a lower paying job, which is better hours, but I'm sure she is still stressed from it. Lots of drama there. Story 190. The job was toxic and am much happier now. I quit in May of last year and decided I'd focus more on my artwork while taking on part-time work. In November, I applied for a call with my new paintings and got into a museum show. I had 7 of my paintings on display for 3 months. Story 191. I always feel like these threads are filled with responses from people who don't have kids. It makes a world of difference. Story 192. I just work till I have enough to live. Depending on your lifestyle, it can be expensive or cheap. For me, it's fairly cheap. I'm 43 and could make 500K last the rest of my life and live fairly comfortable. Will never understand those who have millions and constantly crave more and more. Story 193. Wouldn't say it was a high-paying job, but we gave up our security to pursue the dream of living in Scotland. We were in England, so not a major jump, and it worked out much better for us than we could have dreamed. I'd say pursuit of happiness is more important than pursuing the means that you think might bring you happiness. Story 194. Getting close. I'm 28. I make around 180 before taxes. I have zero life, and I mean zero. I work 13, 14 hours a day, sleep right when I get home, and for my 2 days off, if I get to take them, I just sleep. I was happier when I made 60, but I feel like I'll never find anything like this again, and I need to just gut it out to put myself in a good position for the rest of my life. Story 195. I quit a $450K a year job to take a job making $120K happier and less stressed, more time off, but now I'm losing my house to the bank. At least my hair stopped falling out though. Story 196. I'm broke AF. As freaking obvious as it sounds, for anyone considering doing this, lower your expenses before dropping your income. Mistakes were made. Story 197. When my wife's mom was dying, I spent a lot of time at her bedside. I got an idea to write a memoir containing memories she had of her family and recorded them in those last weeks. She was an incredible woman and had 9 kids, so stories were plentiful. The contents of the stories are less important here, but the fact that at the end, this is what kept her going and optimistic, moved me. I learned that we will regret the time we don't spend with those we love. After that, I quit a 130 AT management job and spent the last 5 years making less than 30. With COVID house inflation, I sold my 3,000 SQFT home to Milwaukee. I was paying a 12-month mortgage on and bought a 1,200 SQFT house and a 39 of travel trailer with cash. During the summer, we traveled to different parts of North America. We prefer government-run parks, state and county, because they are cheaper and provide more of the atmosphere we want. During the school year, I volunteer for all the field trips and spend the rest of my time on personal hobbies and maintaining my home. I will die happy. Story 198. Going well, get to do whatever I want and nothing at all if I feel like it. Been able to do the things I enjoy like travel and spending more time with friends and family, getting a better hold of my health, get to make home-cooked meals and explore new recipes, get to sit down and listen to music, go on walks in the middle of the day, get back into old hobbies and find new ones. No regrets, but I know I have to get back on the grind again. Story 199. I didn't quit, but cut my hours and pay by 23. And I have picked up a landscaping job that covers about 13 the original, pay for twice the work. But the work satisfaction from working with my hands and being outside again every day is so rewarding. And I feel like I am actually proud of myself and my accomplishments every day. I can no longer afford week international vacations multiple times a year anymore, but still have enough to do weekend trips and do fun, cheap activities. Overall, I still consider going back to the higher paying job full-time eventually when my body's more tired and I need to start saving more money again. But for now, I'm happier than I ever was before. Story 200. 20 years later, I still feel I won the lottery by leaving a high-stress, high-paying job to a low-stress, low-paying job. It added to my quality of life, added 4 hours of non-work time a day, and probably added years to my life. Story 201. Good. Found a part-time doing the same thing with substantially more pay. Now, instead of working Monday, Friday, I work only 2-3 days a week. Couldn't be happier about it after working so much in life. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.